In the early 1860s, and for the next 30 years, nestled in the dense Appalachian forests and the Smoky Mountain air, an unmistakable tension hung over the Tug Fork Valley. Two clans, once peaceful neighbors, found themselves locked in a deadly battle that would see scores of lives lost and entire communities divided. But how did it all begin? And what fueled the fires of hatred for so long? This is the incredibly true story, the folklore and the fights of the Hatfields and the McCoys. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends all the way over there in New Zealand.
We have so many wonderful listeners in New Zealand.
And I'm really afraid because I know I'm going to butcher this and we're going to hear about it. So you can tell me if I'm even relatively close by saying, how do they mai? How do they mai? How do they mai?
Erica and Rach, if y'all are listening,
sorry,
send him
Eric.
an email.
Erica, we still beg for forgiveness and we love you.
And Rach, don't forget her sidekick.
And Rachel, yep.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who are just like you, who can't get enough of true crime all the time, can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions and you're in. Yep. We've got lots of new people joining every single day.
Yes,
welcome. Oh, I got to say it.
Yeah, but you got to come up with a foreign language.
I do it. Hey, y'all. I say, hey, y'all.
I was going to say, do a Kentucky welcome.
Because we're in Kentucky and Virginia and West Virginia. Go join.
Yep.
I post photos and other information in there as well. It's a really great group of people. Very supportive.
They are.
We also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it every single episode. You can find that link in our show notes.
Yep.
We appreciate all your messages and emails. Thank you for being with us each and every week. So many of you guys are using the link that says, send Chris and Rob a note. Yeah. We appreciate those so much. I should read a bunch of them next time. I just don't have them with me right now, but I should do that.
Yeah, we'll start doing a little section
We'll start reading those.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Rob, I have wanted to do a story on these two families for a while now.
Yep.
And the more I got into it, the more I wanted to talk about it.
You know, I actually watched a documentary on this a few years ago, and it's pretty incredible what was going on up in the hills of the of Appalachia with those guys. It was pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk all about it.
Yep.
Before I get started, let me thank some sources. PBS American Experience, Wikipedia, Britannica, History.com, the University Press of Kentucky, the Hatfield and McCoy Feud Facebook page, the blog Musings of an Appalachian Lady, and Legends of America.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Tug Fork Valley is on the edge of the American frontier, and the Hatfields and the McCoys were among the first settlers there. They were just like plenty of other mountain families. There were woods that they lived in, and they lived off of the land. They hunted for deer and bear. They would let their hogs just roam out in the woods like wild boar. Then they'd bring them back and slaughter them.
Yep.
And that would keep them going for the winter. It was mountain life.
Yeah.
Now, the Tug Fork River runs between Kentucky and Virginia, and the Hatfields and the McCoys settled on both sides. Now, I'm only saying Virginia at the time because West Virginia wasn't around yet. So don't email me. We're getting there.
All right.
I'm sure there are tons of Hatfield and McCoy aficionados.
Yeah.
So the Tug Fork River is a tributary of the Sandy Fork, which feeds into the Ohio. And as Rob would say, doesn't everything lead to Ohio? Just kidding.
Okay.
William Anderson Hatfield is born in 1839 on the Virginia side of the Tug. They just call it the Tug. He's one of 11 children, and he was a really good hunter. He was very unafraid. There was a story that he killed a mountain lion when he's just a young boy, and they gave him the name Devil Anse at an early age.
Devil Anse?
A-N-S-E, Anse.
Oh, Devil Anse. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I read in an article by one of his direct descendants, it is pronounced Devil Anse, like A-N-T-S. It's spelled A-N-S-E.
Oh, I thought that's what you said at first, Devil Anse.
But they do pronounce it Devil Anse.
Gotcha.
His given first name was Anderson, so it was a play on that name.
Oh, okay.
And it's intended to be a reference to the old-time name for fire ants, just as fire ants attack without mercy.
Gotcha.
So would Devil Anse.
Now it's all coming together now.
He would marry Lavisi Chafin of Logan County, Virginia. I hope I got her name correct. Now, Randolph McCoy, also called Randall and old Randall, they left out the D, Randall, so that's what I'm going to call him.
How you doing there, Randall?
Randall. He was born on October 30th, 1825 in Kentucky to Daniel McCoy and Margaret Taylor McCoy.
Okay.
He grew up in a family of 13 children.
Wow.
Their family farm neighbored the Hatfields. Now, Randall is about 10 years older than Devil Anse, and eventually Randall and his wife move across the Tug Fork River and into Kentucky. Now, Randall McCoy was once described as 6 feet of devil and 180 pounds of hell. And I can't think of a better way to say it. I thought that was great. Some football player should steal that line.
I was 6 foot of skinny, and never mind.
Now, the Tug Valley region is a tight-knit group of people. There's a lot of intermarriage. The Hatfields and the McCoys were actually married to each other.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of harmony in the area, and people took care of each other. But then the Civil War broke out in April of 1861, and the harmony wasn't so harmonious anymore between and even within families.
So there was political fighting all the way back to
I was just about to say, they've been fighting about politics and families for hundreds of years, people.
Yeah.
Anderson Devil Anse Hatfield, who's on the Virginia side, enlisted in the Confederate Army along with a lot of his friends when the state of Virginia decided to secede from the Union. But on the other side of the Tug in Kentucky, they sided with the Union. But many in Kentucky were split, and even between families. Randall McCoy sided with the Confederacy, but 2 of his brothers signed on with the Union, including his brother Asa McCoy. So pro-Union families and pro-Confederate families were living right next door to each other. Just like right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Dogs and cats living together.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like with the McCoys, there were divisions inside the family. In 1863, Western Virginia voters decided to leave the Confederacy, thus making West Virginia a part of the Union and a brand new state. Did you know that's how West Virginia came into being?
I had no idea.
I didn't know that, and I feel stupid that I didn't know that. But that's how they came into being as a state.
That's crazy.
And the Tug Valley is right in the middle of all of this. These borderlands were really violent. There was looting. They killed livestock animals. They were burning down homes of the opposition. They're actually terrorizing each other. And to protect his family from being terrorized, Hatfield left the Union and joined a Confederate militia unit called the Logan Wildcats, where Devil Anse was known for being fearless.
Wow.
Now, near the end of the war, Randall McCoy's brother, Asa, who'd been a part of the 45th Kentucky Infantry, was captured and released by rebels to a Union hospital in Maryland. Now, at the time, Asa was recovering from a gunshot wound to the chest.
Wow.
What?
Jeez.
How did they survive this stuff without modern medicine? I mean, really?
Yeah, and those bullets back then, man. I mean, bullets are bullets, but those were those round leaded. I mean, nobody survived those.
I guess. Asa did.
Man.
But during the early months of the Civil War, Asa joined a company called the Pike County Home Guards under the command of Uriah Runyon, and it's thought he sustained the wound while serving in this unit. Now, William Francis, another man, also led a company of Pike County Guards during 1862, a group which attacked and shot Mose Christian Klein, a friend of Devil Anse. Now, although Klein survived his wounds, Devil Anse vowed to retaliate against the responsible parties.
Wow.
So sometime in 1863, a group of Confederate home guards ambushed and killed William Francis as he was leaving his house, and Devil Anse took credit for the deed. Now, Uriah Runyon, say that 5 times, Uriah Runyon, he later joined the 39th Kentucky Infantry and was killed on May 7th, 1864 in Pike County, Kentucky. His compiled service records say that he was, quote, killed by rebels, end quote. Some of these old records, it's amazing. The handwriting is beautiful. So I think one person is talking and one person is writing because it's really pretty.
Yeah.
On muster rolls beginning on May 6th, 1864, Asa McCoy is reported in a Lexington hospital suffering from a leg fracture. That's where Rob and I live, Lexington, Kentucky. And there we were Confederate, then we were Union. Then it was Confederate, then it was Union. It just depended on who had taken over at the time.
Right.
And you can go downtown Lexington, and there are different houses that were the headquarters for each of the Union and the Confederate.
I did not know.
It's really
that.
Interesting.
Wow.
Well, we got married in one of them, honey.
Yeah, we did. We did. I didn't know that they were separate, though. I didn't know there was Confederate, there was Union.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy.
Beginning in December of 1864, the 45th Kentucky Infantry began mustering its companies out of service. Asa's Company E was mustered out on December 24th, 1864, in Ashland, Kentucky. He was killed near his home on January 7th, 1865, just 13 days after leaving the Union Army.
Wow.
A group of Confederate guerrillas called the Logan Wildcats took credit for the killing, and his wife's pension application actually states that he was, quote, killed by rebels, end quote. There are no existing records pertaining to his death, and no warrants were issued in connection with the murder. But McCoy family tradition points to James Jim Vance, an uncle of Devil Anse and a member of the Wildcats, as the killer. And this begins the feud that would last decades.
Wow.
Devil Anse Hatfield was a suspect in the murder of Asa McCoy at first, but was later confirmed to have been sick at home at the time of the murder. It was widely believed that his uncle, Jim Vance, was the murderer, and regardless, Asa is dead, and Devil Anse feels vindicated. Now, after the Civil War was over, Devil Anse Hatfield settled with his family, wife, and 2 sons. He starts cutting down trees along Grapevine Creek on the West Virginia side of the Tug Fork River. He decides he's going to make a living from a timber company. When the war is over, Devil Anse is still living on his dad's land, and Devil Anse's father had 11 kids, lots of sons, but for reasons that nobody seems to know, Devil Anse is the only son that wasn't left any land when his father died.
Oh, wow.
So he's thinking, I got to make a way for myself. I got to do this on my own.
Right.
And he sees all these trees around him and realizes that it is money.
Yep.
Money did grow on trees back then because the trees equaled money.
Yep.
And this is the beginning of the industrialization that takes place after the Civil War. Now, the people of Tug Valley, who were always looking out for one another, are trying to put back the pieces of their lives. They're putting everything back together again. And as the new economy emerges, these large corporations hired wage workers for opening factories. They're just hiring people.
Okay.
And before, everybody sort of lived off the land. They were farmers.
Right.
And there were lots of folks and investors who looked at this Appalachia region and saw timber and mineral resources and dollar signs. And the capitalists came a-running.
And cousin business is a-booming.
And cousin business was a-booming. Devil Anse starts logging on property that he claimed was his father's, but there were a couple of McCoys, relatives of Randall, who lived nearby, a young guy named Perry Klein and his brother, who said that Devil Anse Hatfield was trespassing and illegally timbering their land. A 5,000-acre plot that they said they inherited from their father. Now, they're not out there with the surveying guys, like blocking off land. And I even want to say, I used to own 145 acres in Indiana. And when I got ready to sell it, well, first off, I had a farmer tell me that my property and his fence, that it wasn't right, that my fence was on his property.
Right.
And when we actually had it all drawn up by the surveyors, his fence was on my property. And I just want to say, this is modern times. So how do you really know in the 1800s?
Yep.
Now, Devil Anse didn't get his name because he was the class clown. People respected him, but they were a little bit afraid of him, too.
Yep.
He's a really powerful figure in the community. And the Klein brothers, they're protesting. You're on our land. Mm-hmm. But Devil Anse just kept right on logging, and he refused to leave. It's almost like the people who take over houses, squatters. Who take over houses. Yeah. They just keep living there. He just kept logging.
Right.
Now, the two Klein boys accused Devil Anse Hatfield of stealing their inheritance, quote, by the muzzle of a gun, end quote.
Man.
Which makes me think that Devil Anse is just standing out there with his gun like, try me.
Yeah, bring it on, baby.
Do you feel lucky today?
Yeah. Hey, y'all, watch this.
Yeah. But then Perry Klein eventually signed over part of the family property to Devil Anse, and no one knows if he was bullied into it. Nobody knows if Devil Anse bullied Perry into that or not. Yeah. But he signs it over. Maybe it was like The Godfather. Either your signature or your brains are going to be on this contract kind of thing.
And keep the cannoli.
Take the gun, keep the cannoli. After this, Perry Klein left Tug Valley, but he's never going to forget that he lost his land to Devil Anse Hatfield. And now Devil Anse Hatfield is one of the largest landowners in the area.
Wow.
Now, Devil Anse couldn't read or write, but he managed to borrow money from local merchants using his new land as collateral, and he bought equipment on credit, and he started hiring his neighbors and his family to all be a part of his timber crew. They would float logs down the Tug Fork to the Big Sandy River and then on to the Ohio River, where the sawmills were cutting the lumber that was rebuilding America. I mean, it's so interesting to think about. They're just floating these logs down these rivers.
That's crazy.
To Louisville or Cincinnati or wherever. Yeah, and picking them up.
Wow.
Now, Devil Anse was an ambitious guy, and he was willing to change with the times. He's an entrepreneur, and I read that he was even a small-scale capitalist. It just kind of made me think of this industrial boom is sort of like the dot-com boom. There were people who got in and did really well. It's the same thing, only in the 1800s. So Devil Anse is creating jobs in the 1870s, and there were lots of young men who were back from war that had absolutely nothing. So they were working for a wage under Devil Anse Hatfield. And he likes to think of himself as sort of a patriarch. He's like the godfather. And his business is very much a family. His economic relationships and his family relationships are kind of one and the same, very incestuous.
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah. But as Devil Anse Hatfield is getting richer and richer, Randall McCoy is getting madder and madder. You see, the Hatfields were more affluent and had more political connections than the McCoys. And Devil Anse's timbering operation was a source of wealth for his family, while the McCoys were more of a lower middle-class family. Old Randall owned a 300-acre farm. Now, both families had also been involved in the manufacturing and selling of illegal moonshine,
There you go.
which was a popular commodity at the time,
Yep.
to make money. If you've never tried moonshine, I highly recommend it.
The apple moonshine is very tasty.
I was just going to say white lightning. If we're in Appalachia, I'm going to say it that way. White lightning, white lightning. It'll burn your lips off, and it's going to kill anything that's in your mouth.
Oh, yeah. We, Chris and I went to the tour of Maker's Mark.
We did.
And in the very beginning of the tour, they have this big, tall still that has basically clear alcohol in it. Mm-hmm. And the gentleman that was giving the tour, there was like, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14 of us in the tour. And he pulls out a big ladle and gets a little dip of this white lightning, basically.
White lightning.
And he said, I'm going to pass this around. He said, now just take a tiny little, or just put on your lip. And one of the ladies in the thing, should we be concerned about germs? And he looked at her and said, yeah, no, you don't have to worry about that at all.
Is it okay they were drinking after each other? And he was like, it's going to kill anything.
And nothing survives this.
And let me tell you, it touches your lips and they go numb.
Yep. Yeah, I think they do that on purpose so nobody talks for the rest of the tour.
Well, it just made me think times were pretty tough. They must have been really, really tough because that's what they were drinking. Yeah. But old Randall McCoy, he's not as fortunate, okay?
All right.
And as the story goes, Randall was a cranky guy. He's the get off my lawn guy. And he's not an entrepreneur like Devil Anse.
Right.
And he wasn't as lucky as Devil Anse.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Randall McCoy tried his hand at timbering. He joined his father in a logging business, but it all fell apart when they were accused of cutting down trees on a neighbor's property. And those landowners took the McCoys to court, and in order to settle, Randall's father had to sell the land that he did own.
Wow.
And now the family has no land and no business.
Jeez.
So basically the McCoys are poor and the Hatfields are living in high cotton. They're getting rich. They're living in high timber.
Yep.
Randall was a farmer, and he's just barely eking out a life for himself and his family. And Randall has a bit of a chip on his shoulder about this, that Devil Anse Hatfield could be so successful, and he and his father had kind of screwed the pooch, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then in 1878, 13 years later, there's a dispute over the ownership of a hog.
Really?
Yeah. Floyd Hatfield, a cousin of Devil Anse, owned this hog, but Randall McCoy, claimed it was his, saying that the notches on the pig's ears were McCoy and not Hatfield marks.
Oh, man.
And the matter was taken to the local justice of the peace, Anderson Preacher Anse Hatfield, who ruled in favor of
Hatfield.
the Hatfields.
Yeah.
By the testimony of a man named Bill Staton, a relative who was part of both families.
Oh, okay. I was going to say of the Hatfield.
Nope.
In
June 1880, Bill Staton, the guy who comes out and says, it belongs to the Hatfields.
Yeah.
June of 1880, Staton is killed by two McCoy brothers.
Wow.
Sam and Paris, who were later acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. So it's kind of if it doesn't go my way, I'm going to get retribution.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to find a way. I'm going to take my piece.
Yeah.
The feud escalated after Rosanna McCoy entered a relationship with Devil Anse's son, Johnson, known as Johns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she leaves her family so she can live with Johns Hatfield in West Virginia.
How'd that go over?
Well, they were intermarried. There were people who were intermarried. I mean, they had to be. There are not that many people who are living out here in this area.
Right.
But Rosanna thought she was going to marry Johns, but he gets her pregnant. And Rosanna eventually goes home back to the McCoys, unmarried and pregnant.
Mm.
But then when the couple tried to resume their relationship, Johns is like, okay, let's just get married. Johns was arrested by the McCoys on outstanding Kentucky bootlegging warrants.
This is just getting better and better.
He was freed from McCoy custody only when Rosanna made a desperate midnight ride to alert Devil Anse Hatfield, who organized a rescue party. The Hatfield party surrounded the McCoys and took Johns back to West Virginia before he could be transported the next day to the county seat in Pikeville, Kentucky. Now, despite what was seen as her betrayal of her own family on his behalf, Johns abandons her, pregnant Rosanna, for her cousin, Nancy McCoy,
Oh, my God.
who he married in 1881.
Wow.
So another rift between the two families.
Yeah.
But maybe not for Nancy, who swooped in and married Johns, you know?
Right.
Also in 1881, a Philadelphia industrialist came to remote Appalachia along the Virginia and southern West Virginia border. His name was Frederick Kimball, and he was the president of the newly created Norfolk and Western Railroad.
Oh, wow.
And why might a railroad guy be interested in this area? Well, it is rich with coal. He has heard about a massive 13-foot thick coal seam, and he comes to the area because he's going to check it out himself.
Yeah.
Now, the northeastern part of the country was all about the steel industry, but they needed coal to power the plants, and the coal in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana are not enough. But Kentucky is rich in coal, still is,
Right.
and Virginia and West Virginia is as well.
Okay.
Coal rich, yeah.
Nice.
So more capitalists start showing up in eastern Kentucky and southern West Virginia, and this new railroad coming through would be able to handle the resources of timber and coal to get them out of the area. Because remember, this is the mountains. And the Norfolk and Western crews start laying down the tracks before the end of 1881. Then in the summer of 1882, families from both sides of the Tug gathered for Election Day at a polling place in Pike County, Kentucky, Pikeville, Kentucky.
Pikeville.
Or if you live there, it's Pike County and it's Pikeville.
Pikeville.
And I love my Eastern Kentucky folks. It's a big deal to come out on Election Day, because people come out of the mountains from where they're working. They're coming out so they can vote. And it was really like a time to see and be seen. Lots of glad handing. Men are out looking to find wives. You name it, okay?
Yep.
And on this day, there was a lot of celebrating and a lot of drinking, probably some moonshine, probably
bit.
some bourbon.
A little bit.
And a lot of young, strapping men all hanging out together.
Lots of testosterone.
Testosterone is filling the air. It's exactly right.
Yep.
And late in the afternoon, a squabble over a small debt breaks out between a distant relative of Devil Anse Hatfield and Randall McCoy's son. His name is Tolbert.
Okay.
These people have some of the absolute best names.
These names don't even exist anymore.
Oh, I bet they do in Appalachia.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep.
Oh, I bet they do in Kentucky and West Virginia. According to historical records, Tolbert was an angry young man who thought his future was pretty bleak. And the guys working for Devil Anse Hatfield were making bank and doing well and buying land, and Tolbert McCoy was a tenant farmer. So there's a little bit of jealousy going on here, too.
Sure.
But Tolbert had had a run-in with Devil Anse Hatfield before this. Tolbert and several of his brothers had arrested Devil Anse's oldest son on a concealed weapons charge and were taking him to jail when Devil Anse and a gang of armed men stopped them. No blood is shed, but the story is that Devil Anse made Tolbert get down on his knees and he humiliated him.
Wow.
So Tolbert is already pissed off beat the band, okay?
I'm sure.
A crowd starts to gather around Tolbert and the relative of Devil Anse as they're fussing at each other. And then another Hatfield steps in. His name is Ellison. And Ellison is big and strong. There's a photo of him. I'll put it in the In-Laws and Outlaws. But Ellison's bigger and badder than Tolbert.
He's a good mountain boy.
Yeah, and Ellison is the Hatfield that Tolbert and his brothers had tried to arrest when his dad and the gang came in, swooped in. This was years before, right?
Yeah,
right. And grabbed him.
Right.
So Tolbert is being watched by everybody in Pike County, and he's already been humiliated by Devil Anse. And Ellison Hatfield is now standing there like the Hulk, right? Tolbert is jealous and angry. He's filled with rage. So when Ellison Hatfield confronts Tolbert McCoy, Tolbert attacked him with a knife.
Ooh.
Now, at first, Ellison was fine, one-on-one. But then two of Tolbert's brothers, Farmer and Bud, joined in. And they stabbed Ellison 27 times.
Man.
Yeah. Then, as Ellison picked up a rock to hit Tolbert McCoy in the head, one of the McCoy brothers shot Ellison Hatfield in the back, severely wounding him. And I read that and I thought, what about the 27 stab wounds?
I mean, that's this guy.
Was it a short knife?
Yeah.
He is a big guy. He's a big guy.
Yeah, but if you look in the dictionary under badass, I'm going to say his picture's in there somewhere.
Well, there's a photo of him, I think, with his brothers, and he is a head taller and he's much beefier than the others.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me in Blazing Saddles when Mongo comes into the saloon.
And he knocks out the horse, punches the horse.
And then he walks in and he's got the piano shoving everybody against the wall.
Yeah. My dad loved the part where he punched the horse. He thought it was hilarious. My dad was in the horse business for 45 years.
Yeah.
But the McCoy brothers are then taken, after they shoot him, the McCoy brothers are then taken to Pikeville and to the county jail by two Kentucky constables. Now, this happens in front of everybody, right?
Yeah.
So here's the tea. Devil Anse wasn't there, but he surely heard about it really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is the incident happened on the Kentucky side of the river.
Oh.
And if the McCoy boys were taken to Pikeville for a trial, Devil Anse thinks they'll be found not guilty because Pikeville wasn't even considered a part of Tug Valley. It was just the county seat of Pike County.
Right.
So Devil Anse Hatfield is going to take the law into his own hands. He gets together a posse and he goes after the McCoy boys while the constables are taking them to jail. So this happens pretty daggone quick, right?
Right.
There are 20 men in this posse. They become a militia. They all worked for Devil Anse. They were all loyal to Devil Anse Hatfield.
Okay.
Now the posse gets the three McCoy boys, rounds them up, and brings them to West Virginia, where they lock them up in an abandoned schoolhouse. And Devil Anse tells the McCoy boys that if Ellison, who was stabbed 27 times and had been shot in the back, if Ellison dies, so will you.
Wow.
That night after the McCoy boys have been rounded up and held captive, Sally McCoy crosses a rain-swollen Tug Fork River to plead for her sons' lives. She goes in and begs for their lives and wanted justice to take place. Instead, just do it inside Pike County Court. Let's just do it the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Bring him in to Pike County Court.
Right.
Which is where Devil Anse didn't want him to be.
Gotcha.
2 days later, Ellison Hatfield dies of his injuries.
Oh, wow.
And then in the middle of the night, Devil Anse and his men take the McCoy brothers to the Kentucky side of the river. They blindfold them and tie them to pawpaw bushes on the riverbank and opened fire.
Wow.
Quote, "We found my three brothers tied together, my little brother on his knees, the top of his head shot off."
Jeez.
Quote.
Man.
It was a brutal scene. I read it was a total of at least 50 shots to the three men. And as they rode away, one of them was to have said, "This might have been a bad idea." I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like Yamamoto when they attacked Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we have awakened the sleeping giant.
Yeah. I mean, they have been back and forth a lot.
Sure.
And people have kind of been shot or whatever under kind of weird circumstances.
Right.
And they've taken jabs at each other. But now,
Yeah,
sons are starting to die, right?
This is brutal.
Soon after, another McCoy boy, the second son of the murdered Asa, who was named Lark McCoy, was ambushed by an alleged West Virginia posse that was led by the Hatfields. So it kind of feels like they're just picking them off.
Yeah.
After this, Randall McCoy tries to raise a posse himself to get revenge on the Hatfields, but his wife told him to let it go. Let it go because retaliation is going to make it worse. And I just want to say, if women ran the world, there wouldn't be wars.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's true.
But by the time all of this is happening, the New York Times is even going to comment on this and call it a, quote, bloody affray, end quote. And, quote, more bloodshed is expected as family members are numerous and vindictive, end quote.
Wow.
And that is an understatement. In 1884, 2 years after the McCoy boys are shot, the Norfolk and Western made its very first shipment of coal from southern West Virginia. But Frederick Kimball, who's now president of the railroad, has bigger plans. He's going to build an extension line west to the Ohio River, and the route had yet to be determined, but it's headed toward the Tug Valley. And you know what that means.
Yep.
That land will be valuable.
Right.
So all these outside investors started buying up land in the backcountry, and land prices in the Tug Valley skyrocketed, and the people who had funded Devil Anse's timber business were now calling in their mark. They wanted their money back, and that really bit into Devil Anse's business. So they want their money back so they can buy some land and get in on this whole thing.
Sure.
Get while the getting's good.
Right.
So he has mounting financial pressure. Devil Anse has mounting financial pressure. And while this is happening, Perry Klein, do you remember him?
Yeah.
He decides to come back and take advantage of Devil Anse's situation.
Oh, wow.
Perry lost his land to Devil Anse about 15 years before, but now Perry has several businesses. He's been a deputy sheriff, and he's also now an attorney who had served as a member of the Kentucky State Legislature.
Oh, man.
He is well connected. He's part of the inner circle. He's the inner circle guy, and he's a part of Pikeville, Kentucky's elite. But Perry Klein has more than just land issues with Devil Anse Hatfield. His sister married Randall McCoy's brother, the Union soldier who was believed to be murdered by Devil Anse's guerrilla group.
Wow.
And because family is family, Perry Klein is now close to the McCoy family.
Right.
And Randall goes to Perry for help. They both hate Devil Anse Hatfield, but Perry, unlike Randall, has some clout. And when Devil Anse Hatfield catches wind of this, he decides he's going to stop Randall McCoy. He sends gunmen to ambush Randall and his son Calvin, but the gunmen killed Randall McCoy's nephews, John and Henderson Scott, instead when they're mistaken as the targets.
Wow.
And days after John and Henderson Scott are murdered, acting constable Cap Hatfield and family friend Tom Wallace broke into the house of Bill Daniels and flogged his wife Mary, sister of Jeff McCoy, who they suspected of warning her brother's family of danger. Jeez. It's like the Appalachian Mafia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
After being on the run, Jeff McCoy and his friend Josiah Hurley set out to capture Tom Wallace and take him to jail in Pikeville, but he escaped then. As Jeff tried to flee, he was shot dead by Cap Hatfield and Tom Wallace on the banks of the Tug Fork River. Then late in November of 1886, violence between the Hatfields and McCoys starts back up again. And it's because 22-year-old Cap Hatfield, one of Devil Anse's sons, stirred things up.
Okay.
And Cap Hatfield was trouble with a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. Even Devil Anse, even his own father, thought that Cap was a little bit of a bad seed.
Wow. That's a pretty high bar.
Now, Cap and Randall McCoy's nephew get into a fight, and as McCoy's nephew was trying to escape to Kentucky by swimming across the Tug Fork River, Cap shot and killed him.
Jeez.
So Randall has lost another family member at the hands of the Hatfields, and Perry is looking for a way to get back at Devil Anse in the first place, Perry Cline.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of issuing an arrest warrant for Cap, Perry Cline revived the 5-year-old case against Anderson, Devil Anse, Hatfield, and his posse for the murder of the 3 McCoy boys.
Really?
But Perry needs permission to pursue the Hatfields across the state line.
Oh, okay.
So he goes to the newly elected governor of Kentucky, Simon Bolivar Buckner.
Boulevard.
Now, as the new governor, he knows how valuable the eastern Kentucky region is with its vast coal fields. So within days of his inauguration, Perry Cline meets with Governor Buckner and asks him to actively prosecute the case against the Hatfields and to increase the reward for their capture to $500 each. It's good to know people in high places.
Absolutely.
Now, Kentucky has this reputation at the time for feuds, not just the Hatfields and the McCoys. So Perry tells the new governor that he can't attract industry leaders to the area unless he gets rid of these marauders, the Hatfields. He's like, you got to get rid of the Hatfields. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to bring in business in this area in eastern Kentucky.
Right, right.
And the governor gets on board. And 4 days later, he sends an extradition request to the governor of West Virginia to please hand over Hatfield and his posse to face charges in Kentucky. And there was quite the hullabaloo over this, with lots of people coming to the Hatfields' defense. And in the end, the governor of West Virginia denied the governor of Kentucky, Governor Buckner's request.
Really?
He was like, no dice, not turning them over.
Wow.
Now, Perry Cline is just pissed. So without any legal authority, he sent a special deputy into West Virginia to capture the Hatfields. He's like, fine, if we can't do this the right way, I'm doing it the wrong way.
Okay.
So he sends in this special deputy. His name was Frank Phillips, and he was known as Bad Frank because he was ruthless.
Wow.
He was also a Pike County deputy sheriff.
Okay.
Bad Frank starts mounting raids across the Tug, and along with him are 2 McCoys, Bud and Jim.
Okay.
And soon, they have arrested 2 of Devil Anse's associates, and he brings them to the Kentucky side of the river and puts them into the Pikeville jail. This is Bad Frank.
Right.
The posse's first victim was Vance, who was killed in the woods after he refused to be arrested. So Bad Frank, acting as an agent for the state of Kentucky, illegally, of course, is saying, we're going to do whatever it takes to bring the Hatfields to justice. And now the gloves are off.
Okay.
Because Devil Anse thinks the state of Kentucky is after him and his family and his business associates.
Okay.
New Year's Day, 1888. That night, under a full moon and on a fresh blanket of snow, the feud hits a fever pitch. At the McCoys' house, Randall and his wife and several of their children and grandchildren are asleep in their beds. Suddenly, their watchdog barks, which made me kind of laugh. I was like, they really used watchdogs they really had dogs who barked for a reason.
Yeah.
And not just Scotty, who has to bark out the window at anybody who feels the need to walk down our sidewalk.
Squirrel.
They're squirrel, right? But their watchdog barks, and a voice calls out for Randall McCoy to give himself up. A group of armed men, led by Cap Hatfield, had the McCoy home surrounded.
Wow.
Now it's Cap, Devil Anse's son, and Jim Vance, an uncle to Devil Anse and Cap's, his buddies, are doing this.
Okay.
And there's some debate on whether Devil Anse knew this was going down or not. He knew. I would stake my life on the fact that he knew.
Right.
The plan was to take out Randall McCoy, just take him out of the picture, and that somehow that would end the feud, and there wouldn't be a reason to come after the Hatfields anymore.
They were trying to cut off the head of the snake.
Exactly.
Yep.
To which I'm like, what?
Yeah.
These people are armed and pissed off.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work.
When Randall McCoy doesn't come out, gunfire rips through the cabin. Randall starts firing back, but then Cap and his buddies set the house on fire. Randall's son and daughter, Calvin and Alifair, were shot dead as they ran to escape the burning house. His wife, Randall's wife, takes off running, but she is hit in the head with the butt of a rifle, knocking her unconscious. Vance and Johns, who is also there, almost killed her by beating her savagely after this. Now, Randall manages to escape, and Cap Hatfield and his crew ride away on their horses as the McCoy home burns to the ground.
Wow.
The McCoy children who managed to escape that night suffered frostbite because it was so cold.
Jeez.
When Randall McCoy returns, he finds that his wife is critically injured and 2 of his children are dead in the snow. And his home is gone.
Wow.
And with this event, as you might imagine, it was a war between the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Yep.
Over the following weeks, Bad Frank conducts about 6 or 7 raids into West Virginia. He kills one of Devil Anse's closest allies, Jim Vance, and rounded up and took 6 other men on McCoy's wanted list. Bad Frank then made other successful raids on Hatfield homes and supporters, capturing many and killing another 3 Hatfield supporters before cornering the rest in Grapevine Creek on January 19th, 1888. So this retribution's happening fast.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for Bad Frank Phillips, Devil Anse and the other Hatfields were waiting for them with an armed group of their own.
Wow.
And a battle ensued between the families.
Jeez.
The Hatfields were eventually apprehended. A deputy, Bill Dempsey, was wounded and executed by Bad Frank Phillips after they surrendered. So people are surrendering and they're still killing them.
Yep.
On August 24th, 1888, 8 of the Hatfields and their friends were indicted for the murder of Randall's young daughter, Alifair, who was killed during the New Year's massacre. They included Cap, Johns, Robert and Elliot Hatfield, Ellison Mounts, French Ellis, Charles Gillespie, and Thomas Chambers.
Man.
Because of issues due to process and illegal extradition, the United States Supreme Court got involved.
Gee whiz.
So who knew that the Supreme Court ruled on the damn Hatfields and McCoys?
I had no idea.
The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in favor of Kentucky. That would be the McCoys, holding that even if a fugitive is returned from the asylum state illegally instead of through lawful extradition procedure, no federal law prevents him from being tried.
Oh, wow.
So if you can catch him, you can try him on your side of the river.
Wow.
Eventually, the men were tried in Kentucky, and all were found guilty. 7 received life in prison, while the 8th, Ellison Cottontop Mounts, was executed by hanging and buried in an unmarked grave within the site of the gallows.
Wow.
Ellison Mounts had tried to retract his confession, stating that he was innocent and that he had only confessed because he expected leniency, but his retraction was denied. Thousands attended his hanging in Pikeville, but though the scaffolding was in the open, its base was fenced in. So you could see him, but once he fell, you couldn't see him.
Watch him drop, but that's it. Yep.
And that was to comply with laws that had been passed, which prohibited public executions.
Okay.
The hanging site is the current location of a classroom building of the present-day University of Pikeville.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And with his last words, Ellison claimed that, quote, "The Hatfields made me do it," end quote.
It's not my fault.
Yeah. No one had been sent to the gallows in Pike County for 40 years.
Wow.
And after Ellison, no one ever was again. Now, of those sent to prison, Valentine Uncle Wall Hatfield, the oldest brother of Devil Anse, was overshadowed by Devil Anse's ambition, but was one of the 8 convicted. He died in prison of unknown causes.
Okay.
He had petitioned his brothers to assist in his emancipation from jail, but nobody came for him because they were afraid they would be captured and brought to trial because they got to cross the river from West Virginia into Kentucky.
Right.
He was buried in the prison cemetery, which has since been paved over.
Wow.
Which makes me think that Pikeville's haunted.
Yeah.
Doc D. Mahan, son-in-law of Valentine and brother of one of the 8 Hatfields convicted, he served 14 years in prison before returning home to live with his son, Melvin. And Pliant Mahan, son-in-law of Valentine, served 14 years in prison before returning home to rejoin his ex-wife, who had remarried but left her second husband to live with Pliant again.
You need a program to keep up with the players.
Now, fighting between the families eased following the hanging of Ellison Mounds. It was almost like, okay, damn, we can kill each other, but they're going to kill us too.
Right.
Trials continued for years until 1901. It was the 1901 trial of Johns, who was sentenced to life imprisonment for his involvement in the New Year's Massacre in the last of the Feud trials. They tried them one by one.
Wow.
And the New York Times called it a, quote, war of extermination, end quote. The governors of Kentucky and West Virginia put their state militias on high alert. It's like we're at DEFCON 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without a home, the McCoys move into Pikeville to escape the West Virginia raids.
Wow.
So between 1880 and 1891, over a dozen family members from the two families have lost their lives.
It's amazing.
Now, Devil Anse Hatfield is worried about his family's safety as well as his own, but he's up to his eyeballs in debt, and he owed hundreds of dollars that were payable immediately, and some of his old debt cases were now on trial. So Devil Anse is now forced to sell his land, and he has to sell it for very little, a fraction of what it will be worth in a few years when the railroad and coal mines come in. And Perry Klein is dancing a little jig because what goes around comes around.
Yep.
4 weeks after the New Year's Day raid, Devil Anse Hatfield sold his land by the Tug River to a coal agent who also agreed to pay off his debts. And then he moved higher into the mountains 20 miles north of the Kentucky border in Logan County. Okay. He basically built himself a fort, a house with no windows, and he posted armed men at each corner of his property.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
That's truly mafia.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then in the summer of 1888, Devil Anse gets word that a reporter with the New York World, which is a newspaper, wanted to interview him. His name was T.C. Crawford, and this is a major scoop to talk to the famous feuding Devil Anse Hatfield. Mm-hmm. And the story was more about selling papers than telling the true story of the Hatfields and the McCoys. And for 3 consecutive Sundays, a 3-part series is released to hundreds of thousands of readers, and the Cincinnati Enquirer picks it up and took the story national, calling Devil Anse Hatfield, quote, the outlaw king, end quote. The Hatfields and the McCoys were officially a media sensation for their famous feud. Soon after, T.C. Crawford published the series in An American Vendetta, the first book to tell the story of the Hatfield-McCoy feud. And this is a PR disaster for the mountain people. I mean, they didn't call it a PR disaster.
Yeah.
But this is a disaster for these mountain folks who were basically described as hillbillies who were savages living in the past.
Yeah.
People who were too stupid to talk and not to fight. T.C. Crawford even writes that, quote, this country is wonderfully rich and needs only a railroad to come up through it to drive out this outlaw class,
Jeez.
end quote.
Man.
Yeah. Randolph McCoy, Randall McCoy, he lived out his years in Pikeville where he ran a ferry. The trauma of the feud haunted him, and apparently he would tell the story to whoever would listen to him talk about it. He died in 1914 at the age of 88.
Wow.
7 years later, thousands of people attended Anderson Devil Anse Hatfield's funeral because the Hatfields had reinvented themselves, and they were part of the middle class. They were working as coal company execs and employees. They were politicians and attorneys.
Wow.
And to celebrate his memory, the family erected a life-size marble statue over Anderson Devil Anse Hatfield's grave.
Wow.
In 1999, a large project known as the Hatfield and McCoy Historic Site Restoration was completed, funded by a federal grant from the Small Business Administration. Great-great-great-grandsons Bo McCoy and Ron McCoy of feud patriarch Randall McCoy organized a joint family reunion of the Hatfields and the McCoys in 2000. that brought national attention and more than 4,000 relatives.
Wow. And nobody got killed.
There were no gunfights that day. But then in 2002, Bo and Ron McCoy brought a lawsuit to acquire access to the McCoy Cemetery, which holds the graves of 6 family members, including 5 slain during the feud. And the McCoys took on a private property owner, John Vance, who had restricted access to the cemetery. So there's still a little bit of, okay.
Yeah.
On June 14th, 2003, in Pikeville, Kentucky, the McCoy cousins partnered with Rio Hatfield of Waynesboro, Virginia, to declare an official truce between the families. Rio Hatfield said that he wanted to show that if the two families could reach an accord, others could also. He had said that he wanted to send a broader message to the world that when national security is at risk, Americans put their differences aside and stand united. Quote, "We're not saying you don't have to fight because sometimes you do have to fight," he said, "but you don't have to fight forever," end quote. It was signed by more than 60 descendants during the 4th Hatfield-McCoy Festival. The truce was touted as a proclamation of peace, saying, quote, "We ask by God's grace and love that we be forever remembered as those that bound together the hearts of two families to form a family of freedom in America," end quote.
Nice.
In September of 2018, a wooden statue standing over 8 feet tall was erected in honor of Randall McCoy at the McCoy home place in Hardy, Kentucky, carved by a chainsaw carver. His name was Travis Williams and was donated to the property. This statue had been commissioned by McCoy property owner and Hatfield descendant Bob Scott.
Mm-hmm.
The statue was unveiled during Hatfield-McCoy Heritage Days in Pike County, Kentucky, an event that occurs every September that brings the Hatfields and the McCoy descendants back to Pike County to celebrate the long-standing peace between the families.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it was interesting to me that still in like 2003, they were like, "Hey, we need access to the cemetery." And they're like, "Well, I don't know about that.
Let me think about that.
We'll see about that."
Yeah.
But that is the story, the folklore, the fighting, the legends of the Hatfields and the McCoys. And that's all I have to say about that. She is only one, but what if one is all that's needed? Hospice nurse Indy Luce has fallen in love. After caring for billionaire Louis Thornberry until his final breath, she's now engaged to marry the heir apparent of the global tech empire, David Thornberry. But as the divinely marked Indy packs up her old life to begin anew, a sacred promise comes back to haunt her with a vengeance. As an unrelenting spiritual battle unfolds in the shadows, the descendants of those like Indy find themselves persistently lured and ensnared as a relentless surge of evil becomes an unstoppable force. With malevolent entities following her every step, what Indy doesn't know about her family's sacred covenant could tip the scales of good and evil. The follow-up to the paranormal suspense novel Lead Me From Temptation and Book 2 of the Divine Darkness series, Deliver Me From Evil, is now available March 29th, 2024, wherever you buy or download books, or go to chriscalvert.com. If evil prowls seeking someone to devour, can one woman seek and save that which is lost?
It's just crazy that whole thing went down and they were just killing each other.
They were literally shooting each other. And every time they would take out one person from this side or one person from this side, then it was like an eye for an eye. We're coming for you.
Well, and once again, it's that total mafia right there. It was mountain mafia.
It is basically Appalachia mafia. It's a little bit like that. You know, they just took the law into their own hands.
Wow. Well, let's get away from that seriousness and go with the ridiculous with a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
Okay, I'm calling this first one, If Only He'd Read the Book First.
Okay.
A Kentucky man.
Oh, gosh,
I know.
in Kentucky.
Yeah, keeping it in Kentucky. A Kentucky man was arrested after he tried to steal a book about, of all things, ethics. Terry J. Davis was charged with the theft after police said he tried to resell a textbook at a University of Louisville bookstore, police said. Yeah. Surveillance video cameras captured Davis taking a book from the school's Health Sciences Center, then trying to sell the textbook at a college bookstore.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, think about it. I used to sell my textbooks for a lot of money.
Yeah.
Always at the end of the year, right before the Derby, and then I had cash to go bet on ponies.
There you go.
I'm ratting myself out.
Well, here's the kicker, though.
What?
The name of the book?
Yeah.
The title?
Yeah.
Resolving Ethical Issues. There you go. All right, number 2, I'm calling Politax.
Politax.
Yeah, a little play on words here.
Okay.
Police in Texas arrested a woman they said beat her boyfriend with a pink stripper pole.
Oh, Politax.
Yeah. Sarah Howell was charged with assault with a bodily injury stemming from an alleged assault that left her home trashed.
Yeah.
Report Kylene Daily Herald. When police arrived, Hal said she had been assaulted.
Okay.
However, the man had used his cell phone to take a video of the incidents, which showed Howell slapping the man 4 times, grabbing a pot from the kitchen, and splashing cooking oil on him.
Oh, my gosh.
The video then stops.
How did he have time to, set it up? Let me put my cell phone right here. All right, record.
I think he was just holding it, running around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The video then stops, he told police, that he stopped filming so that he could run as she chased him around the house, grabbed a pink steel stripper pole, swung it at his head. Now, here's the other thing. In 2010, Howell was arrested for attacking her boyfriend with a gardening tool.
Well, she's original with her weapons, that's for sure.
I think she has a little bit of an anger problem.
Maybe. How'd she get the stripper pole down?
I don't.
I just think of She-Hulk or something. She just rips it out of the wall.
I'm pretty sure she wasn't a petite 98-pound weakling. So, anyway. Okay, number 3, takeout.
Takeout.
Yep, a Chicago woman tried to use her status as a federal government employee to walk up and order food at the McDonald's drive-thru.
What?
Yep, the fast food employees refused the order because she was not in a vehicle.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yep, the 27-year-old woman demanded burgers and fries, claiming that, the workers had to serve her because she was a level 14 government employee.
Hey, level 14. Walk your ass inside the actual restaurant.
A GS-14 employee is the second highest federal worker classification, if anyone doesn't know. Yeah, the employees called police. The woman who smelled of alcohol, imagine that, became combative, telling officers, "Don't touch me." Her blood alcohol content was 0.197 on a preliminary breath test, more than double the level at which a driver is considered drunk. She was arrested on disorderly conduct charges. No word on whether she was actually a GS-14 or not, or even a federal employee.
That smells of, do you know who I am?
It is. Just ridiculous.
Do you know who I am? Yeah, no, I don't know who you are. But
and you know
can't
what?
walk through the drive-thru.
We really don't care.
And nobody cares.
Yeah,
your tax dollars at work, folks.
So there's your bless your hearts.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case and tell us your true crime story.
Yep.
That's my amazing husband out there who is not a Hatfield or a McCoy and came from Ohio, not even Kentucky.
I'm white toast bread. That's what I am. And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.